and I went to graduate school for city planning, so I realized I was more of an urban girly than an international wildlife biologist type. And I was studying city planning and economic development, and it was 2008, 2009. And there was the Great Recession and the resulting Stimulus Act, which got a lot of people, including myself, excited about something that we called then green jobs. And those were jobs to sort of help, with the energy transition that our country still needs to effectuate. And so, since that time, which now is quite a while, more than 15 years, I have been watching, analyzing, doing labor market analysis of the green job, what we call the green job market. I've been funding programs as a funder at the Robin Hood Foundation, and I have been working as a consultant with organizations like Natural Areas Conservancy and JVRPC to help them think about how they integrate workforce development with their missions. And so I'm here to say that even though there have been many terms for these types of jobs, there was a time when green jobs became kind of a dirty word. These jobs have always been there. They have not always looked like we thought they would look or what people hoped they would look like. But they are there, they are here. And that's why I'm so excited to moderate this panel, which, as Elizabeth pointed out, just by virtue of its existence and formulation, is innovation in action, because we're going to talk about a range of training approaches, models, areas of focus that are preparing New Yorkers for a variety of jobs which are so critical to our frontline response to change and resilience. And they're not jobs that are just focused on the new and emerging technologies, which, yes, are a critical piece of the puzzle, but they're the nature-based jobs without which we cannot achieve our city and region's resilience goals. And I have been frustrated time and time again in conversations with people studying the same topic that nature-based jobs are not sort of considered under the same umbrella as what people typically think of as green jobs. Again, it gets back to the point of these jobs exist, they don't always look like what we think they look like. But we are here to change that narrative and to give you all examples. We've already heard some today, which is great. So that is my piece. We cannot achieve our goals without people and community, and so I'm so excited to hear from our panelists, who I'm going to give a chance to introduce themselves, their organization, and their workforce programming. So I'm just going to pass it. Actually, I think it goes in alphabetical order, so Elizabeth, start us off.
Okay, everyone can hear me okay? Yes. I'm starting to lose my voice, so apologies if I'm a little froggy, but wave your hand at me if I'm not speaking loud enough. I'm Elizabeth Jaegar, I'm the Deputy Director of Public Programs and Operations at the Natural Areas Conservancy. I've been with the organization for almost 7 years. My background was, I started off my career as a journalist and a photographer for about 7 years, and decided that I loved communication and storytelling, but just not in the capacity that I was doing it. As a lifelong naturalist, I went back and got a master's degree at CUNY Hunter College in animal behavior and conservation, and have been working at the Natural Areas Conservancy ever since, and never looked back. For those of you that may not be familiar with our work, we are a nonprofit partner in New York City to the New York City Parks Department. We've worked with Patty at NPS and many of our Conservancy partners, especially the JVRPC group here today. And we hope to restore, conserve, protect, and increase access to natural areas all across New York City. There's 20,000 acres of forests and wetlands all throughout New York City, and that's kind of our bread and butter. And we do that through research, through partnerships with other organizations, through increasing stewardship and activation of those spaces to get access for more community members to enter these spaces and enjoy them and benefit from them, and through advocacy and workforce development, which is what I'll be speaking a little bit about here today. And so the Natural Areas Conservancy has had an internship and fellowship program for over just approaching 10 years. And we focus on 4 particular tracks in our Urban NEST program, and NEST stands for Nature, Ecology, and Stewardship Training. We look at it as a multifaceted approach to providing a foundation for youth to have internship careers in this field. And we focus on providing a foundational knowledge base and providing them training in urban ecology, environmental policy, environmental justice, coupling that with also on-the-ground work, field work, so they get their hands into actually doing practical projects in research or stewardship or restoration. We provide them professional development and also really catalyze stewardship as a foundation of the program as well. And at a glance, we've had about 150 interns at high school and college level come through our program in the last 9 years. And we're really proud that of our college folks, 80% of them go on to get full-time jobs within 6 months of the internship program. 90% of them are in the environmental field, which is really nice to see. And I'm trying to see, it's kind of, and one thing that's really foundational to our program is that for our college folks, we partner exclusively with CUNY. And that's a 2-faceted approach to that. One is that we want to make sure that the people in our program, and thus the environmental workforce, is representative of the city of New York. The environmental fields, particularly on the science side, has been predominantly white, and New York City is not. And so by recruiting through CUNY exclusively, which has the most diverse university system in the country, we get a population that looks like New York. And so there's that. And then 2, making sure that we actually have locals that are going into local jobs and training locals to stay here and invest back into their communities. And we'll definitely talk more about that coming up.
Is this on?
Yes. All right, that's me on there. Hey everyone, my name is Anil. That's my current workforce development program over there. My name is Anil. I'm the stewardship program manager at Jamaica Bay-Rockaway Parks Conservancy. I've held my position for 3 years now. And like many college graduates, I graduated from CUNY Queens College in 2020 in environmental studies and urban studies. And like many college graduates coming out of the forest, they're just looking for a position that fits their passion, their role. They want to get involved. And I didn't have much experience, so I just want to start off with saying, I'm proud to be the position I am right now, be leading those, giving those that opportunity out to these current fellows and the fellows in the past. I lead the current stewardship programs and events. I bring me great pride to say we lead the biggest, most impactful stewardship volunteer events in Jamaica Bay. Last year we've removed 24,000 pounds. Unfortunately, we're on track to remove even more this year. It's a double-edged sword, that one. And I currently lead the workforce development program called the Women's Fellowship Program. Started in 2023. We've been scaling up from 8 to 12 to 12 to 15. 24 is coming up. And I've just been given this opportunity for them to work outdoors, get their hands dirty, just experience what's in Jamaica Bay that's been hidden away, and not given, the opportunity to do so because you don't have a college degree or you don't have a driver's license or you don't have any just type of access that everybody's asking for. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome, thank you. So yes, my name is Tanasia Swift. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Engagement at Bay Oyster Project. And I think most people may already know about Bay Oyster Project, but I'll share a little bit about myself. So we, being an Oyster Project, we are a nonprofit, and we started out through this high school called the New York Harbor School, which is currently based out on Long Island. It's also the high school that I attended as part of the second graduating class of 2008. Currently, it is a CTE, or Career and Technical Education high school. I get a little salty when I speak about it now because we did not have those programs when I was in high school. But a lot of the students who are attending this school go through what we call the CTE programs, all which are maritime fields. So from professional scuba diving, aquaculture, marine biology research, to name a few. I am going to cheat a little bit in my presentation because a part of my work and being an Oyster Project was also participating in a community of practice with an institute called Meridian Institute's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Aquaculture Community of Practice. And so many folks from the aquaculture field, whether you are a professor working in the service industry and nonprofits and education, we came together because we realized that there was a need for more diversity in the aquaculture field. So a lot of the points here on this slide, I just put a screenshot of our initial research. So the community of practice started in 2022, and unfortunately was one of the projects that cut funding. But we were coming together and thinking about what are the challenges with workforce development for new entrants going into aquaculture. Although the work that we were doing was based around aquaculture, I think it does fit into green jobs, the environmental field as a whole. So those challenges are very similar. And some of those challenges include just thinking about what the exposure to entrants are. Like, are they being exposed to different careers? Are they being included once they get that exposure? Do they feel a sense of belonging, right? So I encourage, I know Elizabeth sort of like gave a shout out to the JBRPC fellows today, and I just want to like shout you guys out especially because a part of that inclusion and belonging is having them be a part of these conversations, being a part of these events, meeting folks who are in the field, and also making them feel welcome and belong in these spaces. So that was one of the challenges that we outlined. And then also, once they're inside this pipeline, making sure that support is continued. So not just throwing them out there saying, hey, join this new green job or join this amazing environmental initiative, and then that support sort of like begins to fickle out. So there are lots of information on here. I'd be happy to speak about New York Harbor School being an Oyster Project or the Meridian Institute's Diversity and Equity Community of Practice. But I also left my contact information there if anyone is interested in following up after today's presentation. So.
And our final panelist, Robert.
Hi, everybody. So just to kick it off, I'm gonna just gauge the room out a little bit. If you love Jamaica Bay, make some noise, everybody. Love that. So my name is Robert Zandi. I work for CUNY right now at Kingsborough Community College. I'm the Associate Director of Renewable Energy Programs. We have a bunch of free training programs available specifically for environmental justice and disadvantaged community members. I'm also the lead director of something called the Offshore Wind Advisory Network, which is a consortium of 4 CUNY schools, LaGuardia, City Tech, and College of Staten Island. So we're all going around into the community, spread the good word about renewable energy, and then also offer people a variety of renewable energy and sustainable technology training programs. So a little bit about myself. I've been developing, implementing, and overseeing renewable energy and sustainable technology programs and curriculum. I've been working in the field for about 24 years. I started off in San Francisco, California, working for the Department of the Environment. I also worked for the Golden Gate National Parks Recreation Area for a place called Crissy Field in the Presidio. I work for West Coast Wildlands, which is a habitat restoration and the good work out in the marshes and everywhere else that needs it. All my Spartina fans. Yeah, so that's just a little bit about me. I already told you about what I'm doing, but I'm currently working with more than 45 organizations across government, nonprofit organizations, CBOs, and private companies to get the good word out there, share about our opportunities in our training programs, and collaborate on future training programs as well. I'm committed to helping out, inspire, and educate New Yorkers to become the future stewards of the environment, and also to learn and gain skills that they need to contribute back to the community and the environment. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for those introductions to your organizations, but also to yourselves, because I think you are you show the variety of ways into environmental fields and the different types of jobs that exist. And so I think we're gonna do this panel a little bit differently. I'm gonna direct one question specifically to each panelist, maybe ask some follow-up, and then offer other folks a chance to chime in. So I'll start with a question for Elizabeth, which is, something that struck me about NAC's mission, which is focused on natural areas in New York City, was that it does specifically mention creating a local workforce. And so I wanted to ask, why is the local workforce so important when it comes to stewardship and land management of our natural areas?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, well, first of all, our values as an organization, first and foremost, are rooted in respect for the communities and respect for the nature of those communities and finding ways to marry those two things together. But I think it's really about the perspectives that you bring into restoration and conservation and protection, and about the sustainability of that. So, we could bring in a scientist to drive to a site and restore that site, and they could take an ecological perspective to that and say, well, the best thing to do is to restore, this land this way using these kinds of species, whatever. But what you miss in that, if you don't live in that community, is I can't get to that park site because I don't have access. Someone built a bridge, someone built a highway. There's no public transportation for me to get there. Once I'm here, there's no facilities. Once I'm here, I can't get to that view shed to have that beautiful view because there's not a trail that goes there, etc. So if you take simply an ecological approach, you might have healthy ecological systems, but you don't have access, you don't have community buy-in, and that affects your sustainability of the success of those projects. So it's really important to make sure that the people that are doing the work are also bringing that community perspective to it. But then also on the sustainability side, when you are training locals for these kinds of local jobs, the locals are the ones who stay. And that's retention of knowledge, of years and generations of knowledge that you can bring into this work. I mean, I'll just say, there are certain positions in the city that work, in these fields at the Parks Department or DEP, and the requirements on some of those job descriptions require degrees that don't exist in New York City, which means that the only people qualified for those jobs have to get trained outside of the city. So I think we need to be thinking a little bit more comprehensively and cohesively about what are the jobs that need to be done, what is the educational requirement, and making sure that we're making it a virtuous cycle so that people in New York City can get trained in New York City, educated in New York City, and then work in New York City, and keep that knowledge and bring those perspectives into it.
That's great. You answered my follow-up question. I do have the benefit of having gone pretty deep on some of these civil service requirements when I was working with NAC, so to help them shape some of their programming. Does anyone else want to add, from the perspective of your organization, anything on the value of the local involvement in stewardship?
I just want to add, I guess it's maybe sort of similar, but there is a level of knowledge and that generational piece that comes in when you are hiring locally that is not always considered. And I think, the young people, especially in New York City, we use the waterfront. I say we as if I'm still, 15, but it's okay. But use the waterfront very differently than the way maybe naturalists or scientists may use the waterfront and use our natural areas very differently. And so incorporating their ideas, incorporating them into the process and thinking about that culturally, that cultural aspect is quite important.
Thank you for that. I want to say it's important to inspire and educate and teach local community members because they are the future that is going to carry on this work down the road. And without them, we're not going to have the people or the resources or the inspiration to take care of the environment and to create renewable energy or sustainable technology, which is really needed. And something that I've experienced in my endeavors and outreach is just the general lack of awareness that's out there. And I have a very strong team across 4 CUNY schools, and we go out every week into the community to CBOs, EJ organizations, DAC zones, to inspire and educate people on these topics and let them know about the environment and about all these training programs that they're eligible for, that they could get involved with to get a career. And it's just surprising how many people really don't know about it. And so I think it's really extra crucial for us to bolster our efforts to go out into the community and share with the community to let them know what is renewable energy, what is sustainable technology, what is ecological restoration, and the importance of those things, and the fact that they too can have a career in this to provide for themselves, also support their community, their family, and benefit the environment. It's a win-win all around.
Great. I think that's a great segue, and you both have sort of started answering this question, but I wanted to ask Tanasia specifically, and then others can chime in. What are some of the barriers that you see keeping, especially youth, from learning about or entering environmental or stewardship careers?
Yeah, so I touched on it slightly earlier in some of my slides, but I think some of the barriers include, one, mentorship. Well, let's start from the beginning, exposure, right? So thinking about the exposure as the first starting point to the careers that we're talking about today, some of which we see in this room today, I think that's one of the first barriers. Also thinking about expectations, setting expectations that are clear for new entrants going into the field. So not saying and just guiding them into that pipeline, but letting them know exactly what it will look like. What is the social dynamic? What does it look like when you're going to another location in terms of transportation and safety? So some of those smaller things. And then also thinking about soft skills that could be utilized that can be transferable regardless of which field you enter into. Funding is always going to be a big one as well. And then additionally, keeping that leverage and support going for those who are in the field. Many of the students who go to New York Harbor School, we were speaking about this a couple of months ago, when we have opportunities for students from New York Harbor School, so that public high school located on Governors Island, to go to other places, whether it's for jobs. I think a part of it is like, it's the culture shift is a big one for New York City students. And so that is a barrier. But if those jobs are here in New York City, they have their families, their culture, they're rooted here, that makes it a lot easier for them to want to be in these fields. So.
I think probably all of your programs work with a youthful population to some degree or another. So I'm curious if there are other barriers that you've encountered, or sort of on the flip side, ways that you found of addressing some of these barriers. And I guess a sort of follow-up question would be, where do we start to build the pipeline? Where's the best place for that?
I mean, young, as young as possible, right? And so the New York Harbor School is a high school, but we also have a middle school exposing students to those maritime careers as well. So starting there, ideally, with that exposure, they'll go into the New York Harbor School, and then eventually they're meeting industry professionals, they're meeting people who are doing that work. And so it's just this cycle of just starting out young and then continuing on. So as young as possible, ideally.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I think, we started a high school internship program 2 years ago, and one of the big features of that program that we feel very strongly about is that it's not merit-based. Like, you don't have to prove that you were a good science student. What we wanted to do was give access to students who maybe aren't into science yet and maybe haven't had that exposure. And so instead, it's write an essay and tell us why you want to be here. And if it's compelling, then let's give you the opportunity, because I think that the idea of a science identity or an environmental field identity is what's missing from a lot of youth in New York. If you're not getting exposure to quality nature, you're not going to know that it's a pathway that you can have for the career path of your life. And what I'll say is, I think two things in particular that could be done a little bit better. One is about why youth aren't getting into these jobs. One, not all these jobs are very high quality. Especially our partners in the Parks Department continue to have, one-shot funding instead of baseline funding for these roles, which means that the funding gets cut and then renewed every year on a whim. They're seasonal. The wages aren't very high. The city is not investing in these jobs. And so where we're seeing this growth in environmental sectors is often leveraged by the private sector, but the city needs to get on board and really value this and put environmental development, as a priority. And secondly, in naming what our, climate resilience initiatives and priorities are as a city, then you need to invest in that with DOE getting involved in that. If you're saying that the future of climate resilience for our city is going to be an environmental workforce that understands nature-based solutions, green roofs, EVs, whatever it may be, wind, solar, then incorporate that into education K through 12 early. Let these kids know this is going to be a New York City industry that will be a home for you and will be a career path for you, but they're not doing the work. And I think it's like fixing a leaky roof by putting a bucket under the drip. Go to the start and start with workforce development by letting these kids know and build an identity early on that this is a New York City industry.
I 1 million, zillion, gazillion % echo those sentiments. And I think a barrier that was touched on in the last panel too is that you also mentioned is the grant funding. Usually grant funding is like a year or 2 or 3. So we set up these amazing training programs, get people in the training programs, iron out all the kinks, really make it awesome, and then the funding's gone, we gotta go look for something else. And every set of funding is very different. So I would also like to encourage that funding provides supportive and wraparound services for individuals participating in these training programs. That includes Metro cards, meals, if possible, childcare, if possible, stuff like that. And then the next thing, we're fortunate to work with a lot of really great employer partners at Kingsborough, but I would also like to suggest one of the barriers and solutions being committed employer partners who can follow through to place those trainees and graduates from the programs.
Nice read.
I definitely agree with everybody in the panel so far. Early exposure is one of the greatest, barriers to break. But also, when I think about New York City, I only think about the city. So when the jobs, think about jobs, you think about Manhattan, you think about just city-based jobs. I mean, you're not thinking about outdoors, you're not thinking about national parks, you're not thinking about anything along those lines. So I think the major barrier is just getting people outdoors to explore. Myself included, I didn't know half these parks existed until I started working or looking for a job.
As long as it doesn't affect the sound, let's just go with it. It's nice breeze.
Yeah, that's kind of all I have.
No, I think, so I do want to kind of build off that, and I'll just share that when I was working with JBRPC as a consultant, we were thinking and talking about opportunities at Floyd Bennett Field, how can we kind of make how can we re-envision Floyd Bennett Field with workforce development as sort of a consistent strand? And I think some of the analysis that I did was really looking at, this part of New York is not that close to Manhattan, right? These are neighborhoods and areas where they have not traditionally been sort of economic, as many jobs, right? And so how do we, and our transit system has its challenges, so commute times are getting longer. How do we actually create jobs and opportunities that are closer to where people live, right? And sort of spread out the economic base of the city. So thank you for noting that. I think I want to segue into talking about getting into the nitty-gritty a little bit, and this has to do with something that Elizabeth touched on, but it's the issue of kind of job quality and the seasonality of a lot of jobs, even within parks. And ask you, Anil, in what ways does workforce continuity impact the success of ecological restoration and maintenance?
Well, I think consistency is key, and when you don't have a consistent job, it kind of throws off efficiency as well. Elizabeth touched upon this earlier, knowledge retention. You lose a lot of that knowledge, all that experience that you gained from doing that 6-month program or yearly program, and that's going to be passed around to the next cohort of. It has to be restarted from scratch, and you don't pass on those lessons. So I think the biggest drop off is starting over. It takes time to catch everybody back up to speed, and it takes away the opportunity for these employees, these seasonal employees, to become local stakeholders. And have some ownership in the project, in the restoration areas, in just their outdoors.
Thank you. I think I'll ask Robert specifically if you have when we were prepping for the panel, one thing we were talking about was the sort of sometimes disconnect and lag between when people hear about projects, they get excited, funders want to put money into training, and then when the jobs actually materialize. And I think that is probably particularly true in industries that are driven largely by, large-scale capital projects or public investments. And so I'm curious for you to share kind of the ways in which you've had to adjust your training to sort of sync up with that reality.
Thank you for that. I think one of the keys is to provide trainings that provide transferable skills, so that if those jobs are delayed, and they're not going to happen for a couple more years, or they're not as plentiful to start, people are able to go work in the industry, still get their skills up, and then transition into that job when they're more abundant. An example of that is our Walden program or our Deckhand program. We have a lot of people who participate, graduate, and then have a hard time landing right in a renewable energy sustainable technology field. But luckily, they're able to go to another organization, get their skills up, get their experience and expertise, log hours, and then be able to make better wages. So not only are they able to get jobs, but they're able to increase their skills, and then when the jobs are available, they get taken. And I also like to follow up on that point that was just made is I'm also noticing a lot of jobs, they don't really provide livable wages, and it's tough, especially coming out of a training program, a lot of internships, apprenticeships. It's how can you afford this? Making $16 an hour or on a stipend. So I'd just like to encourage that too. I mean, I know a lot of these big projects are multi-million or even billion-dollar projects. So I think we should also cut a little bigger chunk for the entry-level workers.
We worked with Dana actually to identify a couple years ago, as a way to take our internship program to the next level, what are the barriers between getting from college education into these natural resource management jobs? And a lot of it is experience. You see a lot of entry-level jobs at the city level, so we're talking about like civil service job postings, that, it's an entry-level job, but it requires multiple years of experience. Sometimes it's 1 year, but sometimes it's 3 years. Sometimes it's in a, degree program that doesn't exist in New York City. So we tried to dial in, like, what is a way to get there? And so we launched from our internship program into a year-round fellowship program for, rising seniors or graduate students to get more actual work experience under their belt. So by the time they graduate, they have a year of actual work experience credit on their resume, which can be really hard to break into. So a lot of people end up just taking seasonal positions, bouncing around a lot, trying to just spend time building up, the requirements needed for an entry-level full-time role. So I think that employers could do a little bit of a better job of looking at what are you requiring versus what can be taught on the job. I think that that's a really kind of an antiquated hiring practice where we think like an entry-level job should have 2 years of experience. No, an entry-level job should require no experience. That's why it's called entry-level. They're entering a career course. So just think about what needs to be a skill to do the job, and what can I teach you, and understand that mentorship is part of it, because that's also how you build loyalty. When someone, for anyone here, maybe you've had a job where like someone hired you when you didn't really know what you were doing, but they invested in you, you invest in them, and that makes you a more loyal employee too. So so think about that, and then next time you're posting a job, writing a job, if you're an employer, make sure that you're building a pipeline of who can actually enter.
Anyone else want to add to that? Transferable skills? Okay. I'm gonna move a question for Robert, who has a wealth of experience in nature-based stuff, like nature-based jobs and non-nature-based jobs, but I do want to talk about renewable energy jobs. Again, these were sort of the original green jobs from the Obama era. They have developed, the industries have developed and changed. We are seeing obviously a lot more investment, some of it not on this, currently delayed, but I'm curious in your work, what are some of the common misconceptions you've heard about renewable energy jobs and careers, and how have you overcome those and addressed those?
Thank you for that. I want to say the biggest thing is that there are so many jobs that are not directly related to the actual renewable energy or sustainable technology, which are a part of that industry. A lot of people think like, oh, if I'm working on solar, I have to be on roofs. Or if I'm working on hydropower, I have to be at a dam or in the ocean or something. But there are literally thousands of supportive jobs that are associated and related under the umbrella of green jobs. So you have lawyers, administrative people, educators, project coordinators, supply chain distribution managers, tech people. I mean, you name it, there's a job associated or related, developed in that industry. Every industry needs a whole group and set of people to make that industry work and thrive. It's not just the people on the roof, installing the solar panel. There's design people, all kinds of folks involved. Some other misconceptions I would say is just that a lot of people, I deal a lot with environmental justice communities and disadvantaged communities. So I want to say that a common misconception from those communities is like they don't see themselves in those jobs because they're so traditionally not their type of people in those jobs, which we're trying to dispel, discourage, and obliterate completely, because we want to see that flip and switch. And on the other side of that are the employers. A lot of employers may not be so used to working with people from disadvantaged communities or environmental justice communities, but they need to get used to that. This is the future. There's so much funding available out there for training programs for all types of people, but a lot of training programs for people from EJ and DAC communities as well. So I do want to encourage everybody, if you know anybody that's interested in getting involved in renewable energy or sustainable technology, please do connect. There's a variety of schools and campuses and training centers across New York. I'm not just advertising Kingsborough here. There's Ready Center, Solar One, Stacks and Jewels, Green City Forest, and on to the break of dawn. So yeah, check it out. And about misconceptions, I think those are the main ones. Or that the jobs are so limited as well. There are a plethora of jobs. A lot of people also think that like these jobs aren't going to happen or they're not happening, which is not the case. There is a lot of misinformation and propaganda out there around a variety of renewable energy and sustainable technology jobs. But this work is happening, is going to keep happening. Renewable energy is not going anywhere, and it's going to continue to be more and more needed as we progress in the times of society. We're going to require more energy, and we are polluting at exponential rates. So we need to do things to counteract that, clean up the environment, and also produce clean energy too.
Thank you. And I guess I would open the question to the rest of the panelists who are, engaged more in nature-based work. Are there common misconceptions that you think folks have about the types of roles that you're preparing for, the types of work experiences that you're offering?
I mean, similarly, I think that, when you think of someone who's an environmentalist, you're probably imagining someone who's like outdoors in the field all the time. And that's not always the case, right? We need, as you mentioned, educators. We need folks who are writing curriculum. We need folks who are good communicators. We need folks who are great at social media. We need folks who are in the communities who know about the people who are in those spaces. We need finance people. So there are lots of spaces and jobs and careers in the natural areas field that could be applicable to, many different types of people. And I know I'm sort of like going off of the question just slightly, but I think when it comes down to some of the additional barriers that some of us were already talking about, it's a two-way street, right? So from the employer side, thinking about how can we change some of our hiring practices to make sure that they are more inclusive. So one of the things that we've tried to do with Bay and Oyster projects, our job applications, is thinking about what are the requirements. And anything that is not necessarily a requirement, maybe it can be added to the list of, okay, maybe that's preferred, but it's not required to do this job. So, yeah.
I'd like to add one more thing about misconceptions really quick, is that just like under the umbrella of renewable energy and sustainable technology, earthworks are not always considered a part of that, which is totally wrong in my opinion. I think that habitat restoration, organic gardening, biodynamic farming, and all the related topics are definitely a part of sustainable technology that need to be funded more, trained on more, and pushed more.
Yes. Great. Well, so now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to ask a question of all of you, and I'll just preface it a little bit to kind of draw on some of the things we've heard and my experience. The workforce development system in New York City is not a system. It's extremely fragmented. It exists across multiple city agencies and nonprofits and schools at every level, right? CUNY, high schools, etc. Similarly, I think as we saw, there are a lot of agencies that are involved in resilience projects, have goals related to resilience for New York City and for the region. I think Elizabeth touched on something really smart and accurate, which is that, if we want to meet our goals around resiliency, community safety, in the face of a lot of different threats and challenges, we need to invest at a scale that is commensurate with those challenges. And we need to invest particularly in the people and the workforce and the communities that are affected. And so I'm gonna ask you a pie in the sky question, which is that for you, what would a systemic approach to workforce development for critical climate and community infrastructure look like in New York City? And then as a second part to that, what role and at what scale would your organization play in that space? This is a question for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, I'll say, I mentioned this earlier, but I think that when the city is often talking about like climate action, climate resilience, I think that nature-based solutions are largely not a part of that conversation, which I think is a wide rightness. I think that we first have to start with the nature that we have, incorporating that into the conversation as a priority, starting young, starting to say, okay, what industries do we need to develop? What protections do we need to incorporate into our climate action? And let's start incorporating that early so that we're building a pipeline as young as kindergarten, so that this is a staple of education that people are growing up with. Because I think that part of the issue is that environment, nature, climate is not a cultural priority in New York City. Like there are some cities that value nature as infrastructure to a quality urban life. New York City is missing that, I think, and we're hearing that from communities. And so there needs to be a cultural shift, like at a city systemic level, to actually put climate forward. And I'll just quickly say, like the New York City Parks Department gets less than 1% of the entire city budget, despite the fact that 40% of New York City is green, and they make up a large portion of that. And then less than 1% of that budget that they get goes to natural area support, like what we're talking about. So the city is not giving the agencies or the nonprofits or the communities the resources that they need to do the good work. And I think that to your question about how can we play a role, I think that the city should be empowering the experts in the communities to do their work at greater scale. We have CUNY, which is one of the greatest, university systems in the country, incredibly diverse. They could be connecting workforce initiatives with CUNY more, connecting with the agencies that need support and are not getting the funding that they need to do their job, and the nonprofits who continue to step up, and leverage private sector funding to make up the gaps for where, other agencies aren't getting funding from the city. And then in particular, connecting to the communities and relying on their expertise to support those workforce programs.
Yeah, I have sort of two answers to that question. And the first one is, I know we spoke about new interns being like young people who are just entering the job force generally, but I think there's also a population of people who are maybe just older. Maybe they've had a job or a position, but it wasn't a green job or an environmental field. But I think specifically about uncles or family members who are probably looking for work, and as we transition into more green infrastructure and green jobs, I feel like they're probably like left out of the picture. So opportunities for those who are a bit older and maybe they've had a different career path and they're trying to switch out. Additionally, the community-led piece of it, that ownership I think is really important. I think we can't gatekeep when it comes to solutions to helping our environment, and so having communities be able to have the tools that they need and ownership over environmental projects is a big one that can be scalable. So communities having their own smaller environmental initiatives, scaling that citywide, which may lessen the burden for larger groups doing that work, is also as equally important.
That was beautiful. Thank you for that. And I agree. I think a lot of us are so separated in workforce development that it is hard to improve it and scale it if everybody is separate. I know a lot of it's due to earthwork or sustainable technology, renewable energy. And then also, I would say our organization's role in that would just be to continue to support the other organizations and then offer additional trainings. I think if we did organize and centralize, it would boost the popularity and the interest and the participation in workforce development programs, which would in turn reflect that these are greatly needed. More funding would hopefully be designated that way, and then more people would be going through workforce development programs. Not everybody is cut out for a 4-year degree. And also, like you were saying, not everybody's just coming out of high school. We got a lot of people in our programs that are 40, 50, even 60 years old who are looking to get on a different path and do renewable energy, sustainable technology. So I think collaborating, sharing resources, not being so standoffish between organizations, because we're all doing good work and we can achieve much more together.
So I think a systematic approach was literally said throughout this panel. Starting off as early childhood, at early exposure, just getting children out there exploring Jamaica Bay or just our natural areas overall, but also breaking down barriers. We've talked about a few barriers to be broken that stops people from taking this job seriously or just even thinking this is a job. So that could be something as simple as a driver's license. Jaegars don't really have to drive it, right? We have the MTA. So some people might not even think a driver's license is important. So why get it? That'd be another barrier. It quietly hides or shifts people away from getting a job because they don't have a driver's license, and that alone just stops them from an overall, opportunity. The second piece was Eric also said, is a livable wage. I mean, how can you expect people to follow through with this if they don't have a livable wage? Thank you. And third is about adaptation, right? It's all about community resilience. If the community is not resilient, then you have no adaptation, you have nothing to bring forward, you have nothing to carry on. So you have a great job that pays well, that takes care of our environment. That could all be passed on, right? That's the key of resilience. And those are all just the missing components and just a systematic approach to take. Growing them from small, but allowing them to have this career worth taking on, going for generations.
I think, there we go. So I think another systematic thing that can be incorporated, I know there are a lot of environmental initiatives where we're measuring what does the success of these projects look like, and if we're actually incorporating from a social standpoint and from a development standpoint, are these projects inclusive of communities in terms of what does the community feel about these projects? Is it successful because we are developing jobs? Is it successful because it is benefiting from a mental standpoint of the community? Is it inviting more people into this work? So thinking about adding in factors that are more social factors into the success of projects is probably also another great way to think about projects being successful or not. That's great.
I think, and nobody asked, but I'll share my opinion, which is that I think the city is missing, when they think about workforce just as, the job placement, they're missing all the other benefits that can come from the work that's done, either as part of the program or, by the people who then are ready for the jobs. Conversely, when the city only thinks about its climate goals in terms of GHG emissions reduction or other sort of very quantifiable metrics, which are important, and there's a lot of frameworks supporting those, but when they sort of think about those in isolation, they're also really just limiting what they think about as the benefits, right? Groups like these are doing in all corners of the city, and that it allows communities to really own the work, but that it's funded from a place that's centralized and think about it like a climate core type of model or something like that. So if anyone wants to work with me on that idea, please come get it. Okay. You know, I think we have 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna, I think we'll wrap up and hopefully take a question or two. But I did just want to close by saying that I had the chance to visit the South Battery Resilience Project earlier this week, which is part of that system of coastal resilience. It will be opening in a matter of months. It's a beautiful place with passive and active flood barriers, restored, you know, sort of new parkland. There's some ecological features built in the inlet right next to the site. And I was talking to the construction manager, and I said, are the jobs on this project any different than the jobs on a non-resilience project? He said, no. I said, do you have any challenge to hiring, you know, specialty subcontractors or filling any expertise that the project might require? No. How about finding workers? How, you know, how's that? He said, there are, for every 10 openings that there are 4 workers. That's deeply troubling. That's shocking to me. These are union jobs, okay? There are models for moving people through from pre-apprenticeship to apprenticeship to jobs. What's going on? Like that, you know, and I've been at this long enough that I've heard the same challenges, right? Of like, well, you can train more people, but the unions won't commit to more slots for the apprenticeship, right? Like, as we've seen, the jobs are here, the projects are here, they're gonna keep coming, and so, like, what are we doing, you know? So thank you all for the work that you are already doing and will continue to do, and yeah, I think we can take a question or two.